What's going on, everybody? Happy Monday afternoon, and thanks for checking the latest TDR Trade to Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Good week as we got off to a great start here today as presidential candidate Kamala Harris has finally made a comment on why she wants to legalize cannabis. That is good news, to say the least. So we're going to dive into that today with TDR co-host Anthony Varell, as well as we build out more and more of our network in Washington. We're going to bring in another lobbyist from Cannabis in Washington that we met 2 weeks ago as we build out our more network to give you the source of information, no speculation here, just straight up facts and how things are done. And most importantly, why you should listen to this podcast today. We give you the exact reasons as to why safe banking has not received a floor vote. So with that, let's welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varell. Happy Monday. Good to see you. You get pumped up.
How's it going?
Dolphins game tonight. You going?
Debating. It's a short week. I'm out of here on Thursday to go to South Carolina, so might take it easy tonight and forego the game.
Plus,
I'm kind of scarred. Plus, I'm kind of scarred from last year. We were up 14 with 2.5 minutes left and had that epic collapse.
Oh, who was that again?
There's the Titans. We're playing the Titans tonight.
Oh, what? Another Monday night?
Yeah. I have no interest in going to see Tyler Huntley's Miami debut against the team that waxed us last year in the 2.5 minutes to go in the game.
Is it sunny down in southern Florida again?
Beautiful. It's beautiful right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
I could not believe some of the footage that I saw up at St. Pete's Beach from the hurricane. Wow. A lot of sand obviously blown in, a lot of damage that was done. But I hope obviously everybody's doing well up there. Thoughts and prayers, everybody. But you were right. You know, the weather patterns have changed. I can't believe how much the panhandle gets hit from these hurricanes now. But that was some clear evidence as to like what you said is changed for sure. But good to see that, things are on the up and up. But yeah, thoughts and prayers, obviously, with the damage that was done. That was pretty horrific, to say the least. But Monday, we got some good news, obviously. We've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks about Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and if and when she'll make a comment about cannabis. Well, she did today, and want to find out what this all means. So in addition to, let's bring in actually the president of Panoptic Strategies and a friend of the podcast. We see her comments all the time. Finally, a face to the name, Gretchen Gailey. Good to see you. How are things?
Good. How are you?
I am excellent. You are definitely one of the sharpest people I've come across in this space. You've obviously got a great network. You're stationed out of Washington and lobbying, obviously, for cannabis and working on a lot of other endeavors as well. But couldn't have asked the questions that I asked without your direction and education. I know there were times I was looking and preparing to go up to some of the senators, and you're like, no, step back. Let's reframe that question and ask it this way. So I'm learning on the fly. So you're kind of like the producer in the field that day. But I think it's important for our viewers to get, listen, they've seen you make comments on the podcast, but I really want to give people an education on where safe banking is. But the first thing, let's find out more about who you are, what your background is, and what will ultimately led you to the nation's capital.
Sure. Well, I've been in the nation's capital now for over 20 years. I came here directly after school for journalism. I worked for NBC News, Fox News, ABC for a number of years. I was mainly a field producer, so that's why I'm so good at telling you what to do. But I was also on air for a little bit of that. After, 12 years doing journalism, I needed a change. And so I wanted to slow down my life a little bit. So I went to Capitol Hill.
There you go. Right.
Yes. I did that for a couple of years. On the Republican side, I worked for Congressman Bill Schuster, Republican from Pennsylvania. He was chairman of infrastructure and transportation, which made my life a lot easier because everybody likes the guy who builds roads and bridges. There wasn't too much to fight with when it came to him. And then pretty much I realized how much more I preferred the campaigning side, and I got tired of slamming my head against the wall working in Congress. And when I was there was truly like the start of the Tea Party and Ted Cruz, and I was like jag off. So compared to how it is nowadays, I mean, I guess Ted Cruz was a walk in the park. After that, I left and I went into some very exciting stuff doing ticket scalping legislation and genetically modified organism labeling standards.
Wow.
And after wanting to blow my brains out, working on those two issues, that's when I got into cannabis. So that would have been 2014. And
what grabbed your attention though in cannabis right off the top?
Nothing, honestly. I mean, I was like, why don't I try being an entrepreneur? I heard that it's supposed to be fun. I've worked in corporate America and then on the Hill and
I hear you.
all these things for the big boys. And so, but everyone's like, oh, you gotta, make your own way and make some money and blah, blah, blah. And so I joined a company called New Frontier Data. They were just starting out. And frankly, the reason I went to New Frontier is because we were going to tell the good and the bad and the ugly of cannabis, which kind of spoke to my journalism background. I really knew nothing about cannabis whatsoever. And I told them that when they wanted to hire me. And they said, doesn't matter. No one else does either. And I said, okay. And so I joined them and I worked on their government affairs side, but also mainly on their communication side, trying to help them to understand how to speak to politicians, how to speak to the media, to not come across as stoners, to make people understand why cannabis should be relevant and actually should be a topic that's talked around the table.
Well said. That's definitely needed. But, obviously with your background, look no further, right? Because a lot of people that work in the media industry, and once they leave mainstream media, politics is definitely something to get into, but this is badly needed for this industry, is how to prepare yourself and present yourself in a certain way as to what this industry needs, especially when you look at a lot of politicians that are so uneducated and have this perception of the space, right?
And honestly, when I was on the Hill, truly it was drawing straws to see who would go out and talk to the cannabis person who came around. None of us wanted to do it. It was usually the lowest man on the totem pole, some intern you would send out into the hallway to talk to the cannabis cowboy. And there's a guy, he used to walk around the Hill. He still does on occasion, wearing a cowboy hat. And he would try and give out joints for co-sponsors. So there was truly no interest whatsoever in cannabis. And when I started doing it in 2014 with New Frontier, maybe Blumenauer's office had someone to talk to. There really weren't anyone truly interested in the space at all. And if they were on the justice side, or they were in healthcare, or they were ag. Nobody had an actual dedicated cannabis staffer. So you were always trying to figure out what niche that politician might care about the space in, and you would work with them in that regard, and we would just provide data. I mean, New Frontier, we weren't lobbying, and that would confuse them even more because they're like, why are you here? And I'm like, I just want to give you numbers, resources, so you actually know what you're talking about.
So what do you think was the turning point when it came to interest in Washington pertaining to the space?
And
is there interest? Like, obviously there is, but I think there's many of us in this space were just hoping there was going to be a lot more interest as to where we are in 2024, but there was a turning point. When was that?
It's hard to say, honestly. I think when was 2016 was the major election that 8 or 9 states went legal. I think at that point they had to start considering a bit more. For the beginning of cannabis, a lot of people were just waiting to see if Colorado just completely fell apart. Same with Washington state. And so then they saw the problems with Oregon and having, their complete influx and their market cratering. So I think there was a lot of skepticism on whether or not this industry was going to fly.
Yeah.
And then when COVID happened and they actually started making the dispensaries essential, I think that also helped to really push things going. But when you have so many states where medical is part of their legislation, their regulations, they have to care. They have to start caring about what their constituents want. And over half of America's population lives in a state where cannabis is legal at this point.
Yeah.
So we've seen
the industry change. I mean, since 2014, we've seen legislation get introduced, not passed, since 2014 on several occasions. How has the dynamic changed amongst the lawmakers as it relates to cannabis? Like, have they warmed up to it? Are you seeing staffers that are dedicated to dealing with cannabis people? We'll call them, or I mean, like, what does that kind of look like from a ground floor perspective?
I think that the saying, I forget what Washington doesn't change, change has to come to Washington is very true.
Yeah.
There are members where you can go in and say, I want to talk about cannabis. And yes, I would say in most offices nowadays, you'll find somebody who is dedicated on the cannabis side. But again, that might also be their healthcare staffer who's picking it up because they just have medical in their state. When it comes to actual legislation happening, you're going to see a lot more on the House side than you're getting in the Senate, of course. But that's where, bills are supposed to come from, or on the House side. So they definitely have more interest, I would say. And a lot more is passed on the House side. I mean, there haven't been any cannabis votes on the Senate side. It just hasn't happened yet. So that's one thing that always drives me nuts on the Senate side is when people complain about their senators not having done anything yet. They haven't had a vote yet. So it's hard for them to have done something.
So why, in your professional opinion, why hasn't there been a vote on the Senate side? Like, is someone blocking that? I know we like to point fingers and name names. Yeah. And it's been an incendiary topic, I guess, as of recent. Like, run us through that dynamic. Like, why hasn't there been a vote in the Senate as it relates to, let's just say, SAFE?
Okay, well, legislation has not been introduced on the Senate side until you got SAFE. So safe banking finally got its first Senate hearing last year, went through, made it out of committee. So now it is in the position to actually be voted upon. And if you want my honest answer of who is blocking safe banking,
yes,
Chuck Schumer, 100%. Chuck Schumer. And I'm not saying because I come from the right side of the aisle. I'm saying it because he is the Senate majority leader. He is the man who decides what comes up for a vote. It's all up to him. It doesn't matter if he has the votes or he doesn't have the vote. He can vote on anything he damn well pleases. So if you want it for a vote, it needs to go through him. No one else is blocking it. I don't care what he says.
Can you go ahead, Anthony?
I was going to say, just looking at it from a logical perspective, why would he not bring it up for a vote? Because if he were to, and let's say you were to get a bunch of people from the right side of the aisle to balk and vote no, it would essentially bring their I don't want to call them ill intentions, but it would bring their intentions to light. We would actually know who's for and who's against it. Like, what's the drawback or what's the negative for him, I guess, bringing it to the floor for a vote?
If he brings it to the floor for a vote, there are enough Republican votes to pass it. So it will get passed, and then he cannot continue on this narrative of that the Republicans suck and the Republicans are blocking it.
Okay.
That's it.
This is political capital.
It's all political.
Okay.
So what's he afraid of, even if he does do that? It's just, this is the part I don't understand. Maybe this is the side of politics. Like, why is it so fixated, let's say, on this one specific thing? Like, can't they just pass it, move on to something else?
Well, the problem with cannabis, which no matter how much I say, it does not seem to come across to anyone in this industry. Cannabis is not the number one issue on anyone's plate in Washington. It's not the 10th issue. It's not the 20th issue. It's like 33 on their list of to-dos. So when you're coming up for re-election and some jagoff who's running against you wants to say, oh, he'd rather vote for potheads than he would about taking care of immigration or the economy, they don't want to have to get into that fight. And so that's why you always hear about it getting kicked down the road when you have like Ukraine, you have Israel, you have immigration, you have abortion, you have all these other issues that come up, dealing with the budget, all these other reasons of why cannabis always gets pushed down the road, because it doesn't matter. The cannabis voter is not out there making their voice heard and not voting with that as a single issue for them. It just isn't.
Yeah.
I'm going to the polls this election because I care a great deal about women's rights and, the abortion side. Is cannabis going to drive my vote? It is not.
Under what circumstances, what circumstances need to be met for SAFE to actually get put out for a vote on the floor by Chuck? Like, is it just that perennial carrot that he doesn't want to let go? Like, at what point in time is it going to be advantageous for him, let's say, to bring SAFE to a vote and get it done?
I think it's advantageous to him when he wants to look like he wants a win, when he can say, we got this done for cannabis. So for him in the lame duck, it's when he loses the Senate floor and he knows he's not going to have any power in 2 more months. It's when Donald Trump may be the next president and they don't want to give that win to them because they know that the Senate's going to flip, Trump will be in charge, whatever. Then the Republicans can come along and say that they fixed cannabis.
So just for anyone that's not I guess, privy to the procedure of the Senate. Since that bill is in the Senate right now, if a Republican if the Republican majority in the Senate passes after the elections, that speaker could bring that bill to a floor vote. It doesn't necessarily have to be Chuck. The fact that it's there right now. I think I butchered that, but I'm hoping you got the gist of it.
Sure.
Because it's Chuck's bill, but can someone else bring it to the floor for a vote?
Well, technically it's not Chuck's bill, it's Steve Daines' bill. Anyway, but no, yes, it can come up again, but it has to be reintroduced because you're going to be in a new Congress.
Right. Right.
You're going to start the whole process all over again.
So here's a good question. What's the most highly likely scenario that you would need to see for safe to pass during lame duck session? Is that Republicans controlling both the House and the Senate? Or is that still a stretch?
Well, Republicans are most likely going to take the Senate. Yes. I think it does have a good shot, regardless of who wins the presidential, of being brought up in the lame duck. I do.
Okay.
Well, that's
because
interesting.
if say Kamala wins, then Chuck can push it over the finish line now before Republicans take it away from him in the new Congress.
Right.
And if Trump wins, then he gets to say, "We did it, you guys didn't."
Okay.
So if Chuck ever wants the W,
yeah,
it's probably going to be in lame duck.
And Chuck doesn't want to put it up for a vote because then he can no longer blame it on Republicans because he knows it has the votes to pass.
Okay.
Because then that whole narrative's gone.
Right.
That's why they brought up IVF for a vote in the summertime. Why? Because they knew Republicans would vote it down, and come election time, they can then go out and campaign on Republicans don't want to protect your IVF rights. Look at them. They voted against it.
Okay, so Blake Walker writes, even if it's brought up during lame duck in the Senate, how does it get through the House? It has gotten through the House.
It has to. The House will bring it up. The House can take care of it and get it done in quick order. I'm not worried about the House whatsoever.
Does it make not sense? Like, is there the possibility that Chuck still may not bring this a floor vote, even though he knows within 2 months that the Republicans are going to control the Senate, that he's going to lose power within 2 months? Is there still the possibility? Of course there is, but does it make sense for him still not to bring this vote to the floor?
In our minds, it does not make sense. In his mind, he does not care. Chuck Schumer tweets out once a week. Thursday is his day. He cares about cannabis, if you pay attention, or at least his social media staffer does. I mean, the man doesn't care. If he was such this wonderful, loyal advocate to cannabis, where the fuck has he been for the past 30 years?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
You saw my interview with Elizabeth Warren where she was basically saying it's the Republicans that are stalling this. We've had a few people comment that they think it's Mitch McConnell's fault as to why this doesn't get a floor vote. And I've kind of outlined in so many words that he doesn't have the authority, knowing he's not the majority leader of the Senate no longer. So you want to maybe explain to our viewers that way they completely understand why it's not Mitch McConnell's fault that this does not receive a floor vote and therefore doesn't have the authority? Like, how does it work from a political landscape?
I don't know how to be more plain than Mitch McConnell is not the Senate majority leader.
Exactly.
He hasn't been the majority leader since 2021. It's not up to him whether or not this gets a vote. And when it comes down to actually being voted upon, good old Mitch gets one vote, just like everybody else. He gets one vote. And he is probably would vote no. I'm not putting him in the win column on safe whatsoever. But also as him heading out of town, he is no longer going to be leader. Even if they did switch, McConnell is not going to be back.
Yeah.
He has no reason this is not a hill for him to die on.
Yeah.
I don't see McConnell caring that much about cannabis. Truly.
No. What would your response have been to Elizabeth Warren when I spoke to her and she basically was like, this is what I heard a lot. It was just like you speak to different senators and they're pointing the fingers basically at the House and how they need more votes and vice versa. But for, again, anyone that wasn't in Washington and they're trying to understand which side to believe on, what would your response be to Elizabeth Warren if she basically said, look, it is the Republicans that are stalling a lot of this stuff right now?
I would say I don't see how you come to that conclusion whatsoever. This is a bill that has passed the House 7 times. Clearly, they don't have an issue with it. And frankly, you work in the Senate, not in the House. Why don't you concern yourself with your own side of the hill and get shit done for the American people and stop blaming the other guy and stop playing bullshit politics, because we all know that's what it is.
Yeah.
And what would you say for anybody that thinks that a filibuster is actually feasible as it relates to
it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. Currently, we have 8 Republican co-sponsors on this bill. You need one more for the filibuster. You know who my next co-sponsor is on this bill? Donald Trump. The man came out and endorsed safe banking. He is the ultimate co-sponsor. Find me one Republican in the Senate who is willing to go against the guy who's probably going to be the next president. Not going to happen. They're not going to vote against safe.
This will create some definitely some conversation. Does Donald Trump win the election? That's an interesting take, but at the end of the day, that's up in the air. Listen, I do want to talk and keep on the a topic of presidential candidates. Kamala Harris, she actually finally came out and talked about her position on cannabis on the All the Smoke podcast, which is hosted by Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson. She actually made a comment earlier today saying, quote, "I just feel strongly people should not be going to jail for smoking weed. We know historically what that has meant and what has gone and who has gone to jail." And she later said, quote, "Second, I just think we have to come to a point where we have to understand that we need to legalize it and stop criminalizing the behavior." So, look, we were waiting for her response. Do you believe anything that she's saying here? Do you honestly think, like, you just said that, you think that this is eventually going to get passed and have a co-sponsor down the road, but do you believe Kamala Harris and her take on the whole cannabis landscape and trying to legalize this from what she outlined here earlier today?
I applaud Kamala's ability to stick to the talking points. These are the exact same talking points that her and Biden have been pushing since they came into office. If the Democrats really cared about getting anything done, they would have done it by now.
Yeah. So saying that, what next then? Do you believe something will get done?
I do believe that there is hope for this industry. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. I do believe SAFE has an opportunity in the lame duck for something to occur. Yes, I do believe a vote can happen. I believe if Kamala is the next president, she is not going to stand in the way of signing cannabis legislation that comes across her desk.
Yeah.
I think that's a possibility, 100%. We'll see. I think at this current time, you are not going to see her go out on a limb because she needs to court the middle of the country. She needs to court the right side of the aisle that she's trying to get to vote for her. And for all those folks out there who are not cannabis supporters, if she comes out for full-blown legalization, or I think we need to start taking care of their money and helping them out, it's going to look too much like she's on the side of the industry. Yeah. She don't want to do that.
Gretchen, I don't mean to harp on something we just talked about with the filibuster, but someone in the comments is very adamant that there's a current that we couldn't get the bill past the filibuster. Is that even factually correct right now as the bill that is false as the bill stands?
It's false. What do they mean that you can't get a vote?
I have no idea. But
Jeff,
that person's
I would say if you asked me,
that's
in
not
my count, you
procedurally
would have
accurate.
20 to 25 Republican votes.
Yeah.
You may not have that many co-sponsors, but you got the votes. And
in order to filibuster the bill needs to go to the floor for a vote, and then a filibuster is enacted.
You have to have 60 votes, yes, to pass.
Yeah. So procedurally, saying that there's a filibuster before the vote is not factually correct. No, that's what I thought. All right, on to the next question, Chad. I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah.
As he's just going on.
Well, there's some interesting stuff here. Shad, if safe banking is a standalone bill, McConnell can't block it. But if it's a bill added to a must-pass bill, you need 2 votes from House Majority Minority Leader and 2 votes from the Senate. McConnell voted no as a minority leader, and that is why it hasn't gotten a vote in the Senate, period. Yeah, that makes sense. Does it not? Or do you want to elaborate off that, Gretchen?
I'm trying to read it. What?
McConnell can't block the bill. That's basically the gist of what he's saying, which is true.
Right.
So this guy's true. He's being accurate with what he's commenting here on the latest information. But we had some people on Twitter last week that were basically saying that it's not Chuck Schumer's fault as to why this didn't receive a floor vote, that it was Mitch McConnell's. And that's why I brought up the question to basically with Gretchen to clear the air and to really understand how the whole system works. And like you said, you couldn't be more clear. Chuck Schumer is the Senate Majority Leader, and he's the only one that can basically pass a floor vote based on his title right now. It has nothing to do with Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell basically holds one vote towards it all. So that goes towards that. There's a couple other things I wanted to highlight too while we were there. Interesting encounter with Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock. Wanted no part of me whatsoever. Actually saying I misquoted him from his office that I read word for word. Thank God that you had your phone up, basically saying in so many words that he didn't want to pass SAFE because, you know, it would benefit wealthy cannabis investors. And
that's what he said.
That's what the press release says.
That's what the press release said.
Got it.
When I first went up to him, well, we didn't see it because it wasn't filmed, but he basically said I misquoted him. I then came back to Gretchen. Gretchen gave me her phone and said, you know, when he comes back out, walk up to him and read this, you know, from his press release from his office, word for word. And I said it word for word, and he wanted no part of the conversation whatsoever after that. But I bring him up because in addition to Senator Warnock, we've also had some conversations about New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. And we all know his stance in the past regarding the language related to social equity. But you've mentioned something to me while I was there that he's kind of changed his stance a little bit here. Do you want to maybe elaborate as to whether that's true or not? And if so, what he's currently and how he's looking at this and really why he's changed?
He absolutely has changed his stance. I would start with he was never opposed to SAFE in the idea of providing cannabis companies with banking. He was opposed to the idea that he thought there should be more comprehensive criminal justice reform and social equity included in SAFE. He wanted to see a much more comprehensive bill like the CAOA, which was a bill that he co-sponsored with Chuck Schumer, go through before you put SAFE banking up, because he felt that you should deal with the injustices of the wrong, of the folks who have really, you know, and he is completely 100% correct in that.
Correct.
Black and brown communities have suffered the most greatly from the war on drugs. And meanwhile, you see these other folks who you think are getting ahead. But the argument that many of us make is that we need to get banking done. And that's not just going to help wealthy cannabis investors. It helps the little guy. It helps Dr. Eliza Brevard Rodriguez, who's able to then, if she had access to a regular business loan, would not have been in the position she was.
Yeah.
You know, a few weeks ago, trying to get through this. So his stance in the beginning was that he was going to die on his sword before letting SAFE go through. And he has changed that stance. And I truly believe it is because New Jersey has legalized and has put forward adult use. And now he is dealing with constituents like Eliza who have no banking, who are going bankrupt, just trying to get their doors open because it's taking 3 years to get through the process of getting a license. The money is truly a real issue for the small business owner. It may not be such an issue for the MSO, but the little guy, they're feeling it. And he's actually starting to hear that from his constituents and seeing that there are real people being affected by this.
So is that the main reason? Because we all know in Georgia it has a very limited program, a very limited medical program. So when we're basically answering to constituents like Senator Warnock, he's not facing obviously the pressure that Booker's receiving in New Jersey. But is that a fair assessment? I would think as in other reasons why he's viewing this the way he is.
I would say that's true. And I would also put it back also to his background as a minister. Coming from the Black church, they have always greatly been opposed to cannabis and drugs in general. And so I could see this as being a major talking point amongst his parishioners, that this is not something that they want. Because honestly, I don't think this industry has done a very good job of educating communities on what they can do and what they can bring to a community when there's legalization. Yeah.
Amen to that. And I think there's a lot of that more. I got to ask, like right now, what do you think are some things that as a whole, as an industry, and when it pertains to Washington, is there things that we could do differently or could improve on?
Everything. I think this industry has no clue how to deal with Washington whatsoever.
So how could the industry become better informed on how to deal with Washington?
They need to talk to their members. They need to put their money where their mouth is, frankly. They're dropping millions of dollars on their state issues because that's what's going to help them immediately. But what is really needed for this industry to move forward is going to need federal legislation,
Yeah.
regs to really get interstate commerce and various things going. And so you got to start putting that money really towards Washington.
Yeah.
I know it may not sound like kumbaya and everyone's like, oh, politicians should do things for the right reasons. They don't. And the minute that this industry stop believing that Washington is going to work for them because it's the right thing to do, that's when you're going to start to actually get ahead. You need to write to your members. I know that sounds like the oldest, most antiquated bullshit in the world, but 100% a member will come out and say to his LA, what letters did we get this week? If he gets 600 letters on cannabis, he's going to start to care about it. You need to invite your member to your establishment, to your place of business, so they can see what level of security goes into this, how it all actually works, that school buses are not pulling up to dispensaries and the little kids are bouncing off like DeSantis likes to pretend in Florida. They need to understand the level of care that goes into making an edible, to how you care about dosing. Nobody understands. I've been in meetings with people who are for cannabis in Washington, with chiefs of staffs, with members, and said, how many of you have ever been in a dispensary? Nobody raises their hand.
Zero.
How many of you have been to a grow? None of them. They have no concept of how this industry actually operates. And part of the problem with that is the whole state by state issue. And so they can't get eye to eye because every state has different rules. And so they don't really come together on things. And frankly, I don't think that a dispensary is the most welcoming place, especially if you're a medical state. If you don't have a medical card, you're not walking into that establishment.
Right.
Those people need to invite the lawmakers, their staffers. They need to say, come down and see what we're doing so you can better understand. You can see how many people I employ. You can see what it matters to this community to have this here. How I have so many patients who are coming in every day and asking for this and that. When they can see really how it touches people, that's when Washington understands. You can throw all the numbers and things at them, but when you put Eliza in front of you who says, I will be bankrupt tomorrow if you do not pass safe banking, that is when it starts to ring true. That is when shit gets done. That is when they start to care. You need to have those moments. And this industry has just not been doing that.
Well said, Gretchen. Well said. Wanted to ask you, how much do you think of an impact? You know, we got great news from you last week pertaining to Eliza and finally getting her license for her dispensary in the state of New Jersey. She was, like I said, in Washington speaking to Senator Booker the previous week. Do you think that had some play into, like, you know, finally getting her decision, like being there?
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
And even if it wasn't specifically Booker's office going through and talking to someone in Jersey, because technically, ethically, they cannot do that. That goes against the rules. They can inquire to New Jersey what is going on with her application and what's proceeding, but they can't make any actual overtures or try and get it through. But when the regulators in New Jersey see her writing blogs about this, they see the video of her talking to Booker, they see her out there pounding the pavement. Washington was like the final stop on her tour of talking to people. She went to a whole veterans workshop the day before in New Jersey, where she also saw regulators. She goes to the meetings. I mean, she has to pound the pavement, which is ridiculous, honestly, how much extra effort and work she has to put in and get in people's faces to help them understand what's going on. But when they can see this chick is willing to go to those levels to get this done, they know that she is not going away. And it's frankly sad that the squeaky wheel gets the oil has to be the way to get anything done in this industry. But I do really think it matters and helps.
TDR's Traded Black podcast here on a Monday. What a great conversation this is with the founder of Panoptic Strategies and Cannabis Lobbyist, Gretchen Gailey, along with Anthony Vrell. I'm Shad Dales, as we're talking about why safe banking has not received a floor vote. Keep the comments coming in. This is a hot conversation right now. So, look, we're 5 weeks away from the election. We've already kind of speculated as to who might win, who might lose, what could happen during lame duck session. So let's fast forward into 2025. We all know rescheduling is on the table for an ALJ hearing come early December. How do you see that all playing out in the overall industry from a legislation standpoint going into 2025 and progressing as the year starts to, you know, go from Q1 into, you know, the summer and then into the back end of next year?
I think that this industry needs to keep the pressure on. I think that people have definitely gotten very excited by the possibility of rescheduling this year. I hate to burst their bubbles, but I do like to live in reality.
Yeah.
It's going to take, I think, at a minimum, a few weeks to get through the hearing. And then I believe the judge may take up to a year to come to a decision on rescheduling.
Why a full year? Why do you think that?
Because he has no reason to do it quickly, truly.
But why does he have a reason? But what's the reason to drag it out?
Because judges love to drag stuff out. This is Washington, and nothing moves quickly.
Mm.
I don't see it being his number one priority in getting done. He has other things on his docket as well. I think it'll take time, and especially I think the opposition he may hear as to why rescheduling should happen. And it's not even so much that maybe Schedule 3 is the issue. Maybe he's going to be like, we should come back at Schedule 2, and he's going to debate on that. I think that there are a lot of factors that could go into this. And so I do think that a decision on rescheduling could take much longer than people are anticipating. And even then, when a decision is finally determined, then you got to get the regs in place, and that's going to take just as long or longer. So I think it's going to take quite a bit of time. And frankly, given some of the decisions recently, like the Chevron decision, who even knows if the DEA is finally going to be able to make the decision on this, especially if Trump comes into power. I think you're going to see Congress pushing damn hard to be the ones in charge of what happens to cannabis. I don't think this is going to be the easy fight that people think. And for the folks who are just putting all their efforts into various state initiatives, Washington is where they need to be worried about.
Well, I do agree with what you're saying, but those companies that are pouring the massive amounts of capital into those state markets, they're doing so because that's in their best interest today. Mm-hmm. Conquer the states today, conquer the federal government tomorrow. And by using that calculus, their competition over time is going to eventually slowly die off and die on the vine. So it's a little bit strategic. I mean, I know it's not what everybody likes to hear,
sure.
But the federal stuff is great for them in the long term, but not so much needed in the short term, I guess is a better way to put it. The state stuff is impacting their top and bottom lines today. And I agree with you. I mean, I know that we could talk about Florida, where it'd be fantastic to see that kind of capital allocation towards federal reform versus state reform. But the fact of the matter is, if that state reform gets passed come November, they're leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else today. And then they go conquer federal, which to them, if that A3 passes, doesn't matter to them what happens at the federal level for 3, 4, 5 years. They've got their business strategy pretty much set up for success going into the future.
I mean, I truly believe, and I know this is not going to be a popular opinion, that, the MSOs have definitely slow walked any efforts on the federal side because they keep hiring all these high paid lobbyists who don't do a damn thing for them, who maybe show up once a quarter to something that they pay millions of dollars to for no reason, because they can then put it out there. We're trying, we're doing it. We're going to put some money into these social equity programs on the side to show that we're good guys. But in the long run, the longer we take on the federal side, it's just going to kill the small business. It's going to kill the little guy, and they're just going to dominate. That's all it is.
Unfortunately, though, I mean, it's good business. I'm not advocating for that, but it's good business on their part. If we're talking about dynamics of an industry, and I'm the 800-pound gorilla, and I can survive and slow play this, for me, that's good business. I'm playing the long game. I don't care about the little guy going out of business. Not saying that I don't, but I can't slight them for leveraging that strategy, because 5, 10, 15 years down the road, it's going to pay off leaps and bounds for them going into the future. And I mean, it is true that federal stuff does get slow played for reasons that we might not want to talk about out loud.
Yeah. Welcome to a Monday of This is the Reality of Trade to Black podcast, as we get real and honest here on a Monday. But listen, this is all good dialogue, agree or disagree. Feel free to leave some comments again below and smash that like button. I know there's a lot of people here that are asking questions more and more based on some of the comments. Few people do disagree as well, but this is all part of a healthy conversation, and we like to have people on. Go ahead.
Hold on, Ben. I'm not saying it's not unscrupulous. It is unscrupulous. But it's good business and it's good strategy for the companies that are employing it. That's all that I'm saying. And I'm not saying that I agree with it, but it makes sense. If you've ever ran a business, or if you ever started a business, or if you've done any sort of high level banking or M&A or any of that kind of stuff, it makes sense from a strategic standpoint to slow play regulation as long as it's not killing your business.
Yeah. Seth Jacobs also brought up the CBO score, and I know you wanted to talk about that briefly, Anthony, and I think it was something that you wanted to touch on too, Gretchen, but that was interesting news that came out earlier today.
So I know we got the score. They scored the House bill in 2019. I know that I needed to correct myself with something I tweeted earlier. They scored the Senate bill being safer this week. What does that mean? Is that telegraphing anything, that they're spending the time to actually score the bill? Is it a positive? Is it kind of just something going through the motions? Like, is there anything to read into to that from scoring this most recent version of the bill?
I mean, honestly, I think it's going through the motions. I don't think it does anything whatsoever for SAFE.
Well, you're straight to the point.
I tend to agree. It was a good headline. It sounded good, but the more I read into it, it was kind of like, well, this isn't really anything new. It's nothing really exciting. This is kind of them just going through the process. It's good talking points with what the economic stimulus could potentially be from SAFE, but it doesn't get us any closer to actually bringing it to a vote or passing the bill.
Yeah. Shane, I'm just Shane writes, Shad, I'm just being real. Yeah, I know, and I love it. If everybody has their own opinion, and I completely agree. I can understand the frustration that people have pertaining to Washington. I know when I was there, it was definitely some of the things that you speculate on, but then you get a front row seat, and everything you thought was true ends up being true. It's a real eye opener when you actually experience that, and I think if anything, you just got to continue to push your foot forward. And it's like the reasons why you're still in Washington, Gretchen, and trying to make things happen and educate people. And, if a great example of anything is Eliza and what she did and her story, and look where she is now. She got what she wanted, but she made the effort. And that's where I keep saying this to people that watch this podcast, that if you're involved in this, whether it's from an executive, business owner, entrepreneur, or investor, there's things that you can do. Go to Washington and speak to, various people, even for 2 hours, so to speak, and get the message out there because other people are doing it, and look what ends up happening. But I want to keep on the note as well, because I know that you are working outside of this on an endeavor called Project Champion. I think that was that you hold near and dear to your heart. And you want to explain, I guess, to our audience as to what this project is, who's involved, and most importantly, how it really pushes the narrative forward for the industry?
Sure. A Project Champion is a 501c4 that I started with Ricky Williams, Jim McMahon, and Kyle Turley. These guys all care very much about legalization for various reasons, a lot from the patient side. These guys have put their bodies through hell as athletes and the NFL. I think Jim told me he's had 33 surgeries over the course of his life, dealing with.
I could not believe when we saw him in April, just this pain that his foot was in. And I honestly, what a great guy, him and Ricky, very approachable people. But anyways, could continue.
Yeah. So these guys are they're my champions.
Yeah.
But what we are trying to do, honestly, is create cannabis champions in Congress. What I would love to do is create champions before they get to Congress, because that gives you more access to these politicians. And you're not writing nearly as big of a check when you're working with them on the campaigning side of things. It's much easier to get in front of a member when they're at a town hall or those various things. And for a number of these folks, like this year, we were looking at Pennsylvania and Michigan as two open Senate races that, well, not officially open. Michigan's an open race. But Bob Casey, I could care less for, being a Pennsylvania girl. And frankly, he doesn't care a damn thing about cannabis, except for whatever Joe Biden tells him to do. which is pretty much nothing. So I have no problem.
Can you be more honest? Anyway,
I go in his office. I've advocated for safe, and they're just like, nope. And I'm like,
really?
Why? And they can't give you a reason. Yes. And it's because, well, we got to see how things play out. So I got to wait to see what Joe tells me to do. I got to wait to see what Kamala tells me to do. Senator Casey is nothing but a ham sandwich. Anyway, but I can say that because I'm a Pennsylvanian and he's been my senator forever doing nothing. Anyways, so, and plus these are states where cannabis is a big issue, Pennsylvania and Michigan. And so we were looking at McCormick, who is also a veteran, who cares about the veteran side of things.
Yep.
The Michigan race is wide open. And so we want them to care about cannabis prior to getting there. And then once they are there, then we're going to advocate and do various things on the Hill. I've had Ricky and Jim here on the Hill before. And not that I am not, a crowd stopper. I usually am. But when you got Ricky Williams or Jim McMahon standing in front of a member, they will stop and talk to them, regardless of if we have a meeting or what time of day it is. We had almost a 15-minute conversation with Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, who is dead set against cannabis, could care less, would never take a meeting with me about cannabis if I went to his office and did that. But I put the two of them in front of him. He's willing to stop. He's willing to hear them out. He's willing to have that conversation. And that's what we need to do. We see so many celebrity brands and folks in cannabis, but none of them are actually showing up and doing the advocating of what we need. That's when you get eyeballs on them. I got the guys on CNN when we did that. That's when people start to care and pay notice to this industry. If you had folks like Willie Nelson walking down the halls, smoking a joint, which I don't advise doing, but actually out there advocating and caring, and I'm not saying that Willie doesn't, I know he's quite old, but you see all these brands that are making money off this industry and everyone else. Why are they not out there pushing to also try and help? These guys have the time, the money, and frankly, the influence. I mean, you see Taylor Swift, who's bringing little girls to the NFL all of a sudden. We're like, yay, they're Chiefs fans. It's like, celebrity does matter. It may not matter exactly in how they're selling their cannabis right now. I think it'll matter a bit more when there's interstate commerce. But truly for this industry, we need to be creating champions. We should not be, frankly, half the battle in Washington is getting people to have the conversation and do the talking. It's not about specific bills. If we can get people on our side and willing to listen, that is where we start to see the change. That's when people start to care.
Do you think we get there?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, you know, people are like, how are you still in this? And I'm like, well, for the first, 6 years, I was twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the feds to care. I'm like, finally, I get to do something in Washington. So I do think we get there. Honestly, I think it may come through the courts and never through Congress. I've told people this before. I don't think you will ever see a vote for national adult use. I don't. I don't see these old white guys are never going to vote for that.
Yeah.
No, they're all going to have to die out.
It's ridiculous. I think you have much better hope with a national medical bill prior to doing that kind of thing. I do think there's hope for cannabis, but you have to show up if you want it. And frankly,
I think it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court. Eventually is the only way that it gets legalized or taken fully off the CSA. If they can actually go to the Supreme Court and prove that it's unconstitutional to have cannabis on the CSA or rated as it is right now. Anything short of that, I think full legalization, full descheduling is a pipe dream, no pun intended.
Well, and I think you can see it go through the courts in other ways. If it's going to be employment law, I think when it comes to housing and mortgages, with gun rights, I think there's a lot of different ways you could approach getting cannabis in front of the courts and not just whether or not the CSA is legal. And frankly, it's so odd that, our biggest fan is, what's his name? You know what I'm talking about.
Who?
Why am I blanking?
Is he a politician?
No, the Supreme Court justice.
Somebody help.
Not Gorsuch.
No, not at all.
Leave a comment. Help us out.
This is gonna drive me nuts.
Clarence Thomas.
Yes, Clarence Thomas. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, who would have ever thought that?
Yeah. Noah Hammond from.
By the way, there was Marijuana Moment actually was reporting not too long ago that it's a major vulnerability for Trump's campaign that JD Vance is anti-cannabis, which was an interesting talking point, which we spoke to him long before he was the vice presidential nominee the first time we went to Washington. I wouldn't consider him anti-cannabis when in that exchange, speaking about SAFE. He seemed like he was taking a pretty sensible approach to it. And I mean, if you want to take the equation that Gretchen had laid out, JD Vance isn't going against the wishings of Donald Trump. That is not going to happen. I can't see that happening. I can't see JD coming out and speaking out against cannabis after Trump's long-winded, well thought out statement as it relates to the industry, covering everything from SAFE to Amendment 3. I just don't see that happening.
If JD Vance can equate Trump to Hitler and then become his running mate, he can flip-flop on cannabis.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if Donald Trump were to be elected, he's changing his stance on this. You think, could he be a sponsor of this bill?
But I mean, we got a debate this week that the cannabis might be a topic at the debate for the VPs.
Maybe, because Tim Walz at least actually had to care about cannabis as governor. Maybe.
Yeah, that's the only reason I'm saying that. I'm not trying to get speculative on the debates again, but the fact that he comes from Minnesota, they're installing adult use. He's got talking points prepared for it. JD Vance, Ohio, adult use, red state. That's kind of changed the political calculus as it relates to the plant. It could find its way in there versus it finding its way into the actual presidential debate.
Yeah.
JD Vance's answer is states' rights all day and all night. That's his answer.
Oh, yeah. But he's not going to be against it. I don't think he's going to be against it.
Mm-mm.
That's the safe answer for all these guys in Washington, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not if you're a Democrat.
True. Yeah. Good point. Listen, this has been great. Before I let you go, if any executives are watching on this space or this podcast right now, if they want to learn more information about Project Champion, where can they learn about it?
They can go to our website, www.projectchampion.org. We're also on Instagram and Twitter as well. They can go to Panoptic Strategies and find my phone number. I don't care. I'll talk to anybody. You want to find me on Facebook? I'll talk to you about it.
There you go.
Take you out for a drink, buy a cup of coffee. I'll do a lot of things to get this done.
This has been great. We've had nothing short of some incredible comments, to say the least. And this has been awesome. The reason why I wanted to have you on is because, look, you got a strong network and you've got experience being at the front lines of obviously Washington and meeting a lot with these politicians one-on-one. So wanted to, give people a true understanding of how it works in Washington and how these votes get floor votes and really drum away what we think and what some of the speculation is and just speak on facts. And I think we got all that, Anthony, today with a lot of honesty and, agree or disagree. This is what it's all about, is having healthy conversations and just advancing the conversation forward. So on behalf of Anthony and I think everybody that's watching here today, we appreciate you checking in, Gretchen, and let's keep in touch and have you on again.
Of course, anytime.
All right. Well, listen, hopefully things are well in Washington and we'll check back with you in a week or two.
All right. Sounds
all
good.
Right. Thanks, Gretchen. Well, that was an interesting conversation, to say the least. I think a lot of people got a lot out of that. Had some people that were, we got heated there, and I think that's good. But, I think it was...
to be honest, the guys that were commenting about the filibuster and us being partisan, they comment on the YouTube stuff that were partisan. They comment on Twitter that were partisan, and they come into the comments saying that we're partisan, when the fact of the matter is we're not partisan.
Yeah.
So some people might have TDS, might have other opinions, but we don't really take sides here as far as political affiliation goes.
As much as mainstream media is corrupt and in a lot of ways, they still have an influence on the way people think in today's day and age, because if you have any sort of opinion, it's just, I guess, if you're backing a certain political party, and if there's anything that questions, or at least you want to have an open dialogue conversation, people start to think that you're leaning towards one way or the other. And that's the last thing that I want to do.
The problem,
I want no conversation in that. It doesn't do me any good. I don't care. No. I'm a Canadian. I don't care. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. What I want is the advancement of the Canadian landscape. Right?
The advancement of the Canadian landscape. You guys going to come annex the United States?
cannabis landscape. Sorry, my apologies. I screwed that up, but you understand my point.
Yeah.
One thing I want to reach out to our audience too, and you and I are actually discussing this off camera today, but we're thinking about some ideas and creating some new shows, maybe some culture and lifestyle as well. But I'd love to get people's feedback. Let us know. But definitely some ideas that we're thinking about branching off and obviously adding to this podcast, but maybe doing a couple of different shows with different formats on not on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. But let us know what your overall general interest would be pertaining to that. And if so, what are some of the things you'd like to see? We'd love to hear your feedback. As usual, as I said before, leave lots of comments below, smash that like button, and let's share this video with your network. As we've said before, it's not just about us and the guests that we have on the show. It's about building a community. And let's face it, we all want the cannabis industry to push forward. And conversations like this, Anthony, today help, don't they?
Yeah, greatly.
All right. Coming up on Wednesday, we're going to have some interesting guests on, including Raj Grover. We talk about his latest earnings from a couple of weeks ago with High Tide as well. We got a great guest on talking about the California market. That should be an interesting one with Seth Yakutin, who we met down at Benzenga last spring, but really, really interesting guy who really has his finger on the pulse when it comes to the understanding the space, especially the California market. Very, very well connected guy, but that's coming up on Wednesday at 4:00. In the meantime, I appreciate you all for checking in here today. Anthony, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Go Dolphins tonight. Go Lions as well Monday night. And we'll see you back here Wednesday at 4:00.
I'll see everybody Wednesday.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.